Okay, everyone, welcome to the Respect the Math podcast brought to you by Reliable Tech Help. For all your IT needs, call Reliable Tech Help at 502-797-7399 or visit our website at reliabletechhelp.com. I'm your host, Digital David Snyder. Here at the Respect the Math podcast, we talk about everything from technology to business, science, popular culture, and more. Basically, the things that I'm interested in because I'm kind of selfish that way. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and podcast apps from Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, and others. Please interact with us online, and if you like what you hear, please subscribe and share our content. We'd love to hear from you. Today, our guest is David Hastings. Welcome.
Thank you.
David Hastings and I have been friends and co-workers for about 13 years now. He's one of my favorite people. I admire him and look up to him, and it's a privilege to call him my friend and to work with him. David has some very specific skill sets. He's a first-rate problem solver. He genuinely enjoys the chase of figuring out what's wrong and coming up with a creative and innovative solution that served him very well in his 20-plus years in IT, correct?
That's correct.
Yeah. So David and I work together at Reliable Tech Help. He is my business IT consultant. 95% of all the clients that we help that are in a business environment, you'll see David, and pretty much only David. He likes that technical, challenging work. He likes being in the weeds day in and day out and figuring out complicated solutions to problems and resolving issues. So welcome to the podcast today, David. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit about yourself. Give us your background. What have you done in the last 20 years that brought you to this point?
Wow. I didn't start out in IT. I started out as a photographer, actually. I was doing product photography for companies up in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I did stuff for Dayton Hudson. Finger Hut was where I spent a lot of time, if you're familiar with Finger Hut.
Sure, the catalog, yeah.
Yeah, all kinds of crap in there. I took a lot of those pictures.
So a lot of product photography?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
That was mostly what I did.
Huh.
And then I got tired of doing that. I sold all my gear, and I switched careers. And I went back to my other passion, which was computers, and went back to school for a year, got some basics, and then started consulting for various companies along the way.
Mm-hmm. So you just kind of started out following a passion of yours. You thought computers were interesting and fun, and you were doing it anyway, so why not try to find a career path in that?
That's right. I had my first computer when I was, 10 or 12.
Yeah?
It was a Radio Shack Color
Tandy.
Computer 2.
I was gonna guess, was that prior to the Tandy, or was that a Tandy?
That was prior to the Tandy. That was along the same lines as the Commodore 64.
Yeah.
Did my first hardware upgrade.
Yeah.
That Coco 2, as they call it, was an 8-bit of RAM.
8 bits of RAM. Nice.
That was it. That was it, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And I found in the back of a Rainbow magazine, which was the magazine that supported the Coco. And every month I got that magazine, and I quickly opened it up to the centerfold.
Yeah.
And the centerfold was not what you'd think. It was actually a basic program that you could run.
Really?
And you could type in on the basic emulator on the Coco 2.
Yeah.
And then I would sit down for hours typing in the code, only to find that I had made syntax errors along the way.
Yeah.
And have to go back and figure those out. And sometimes I got them working, sometimes not.
Yeah.
But in the back of the magazine, there was a section that basically opened up and gave you ads and things. And one of them was a 64-bit upgrade.
Wow. From 8-bit to 64.
Yes.
Okay.
So what that entailed is I ordered it. My father paid for it, ordered it for me, and I got it, and it was a little sleeve of 8 circuit chips, ones with the little feet on them.
Yeah.
And so I popped the case off. I carefully removed the 8 1-bit chips that were on the motherboard and inserted the 8-bit chips, which gave me 64 bits.
Ah.
And then my father had to solder, because I was 10, a jumper on the motherboard between 2 solder points that allowed it to register 64 bits.
Wow. Now, what was a computer doing back then? Are we talking around 1980 roughly? Or
Somewhere in that neighborhood, yeah.
So what could you do? You ran a calculator on there. You could play some disk-based games, some basic...
Yeah, well, I didn't have discs.
Oh, no floppies at all at that point?
I had cassette tapes.
Oh, wow.
I had a
that far
cassette
back.
tape drive.
Okay.
And I actually ordered games on cassette tape And
Yeah.
you'd take them and drop them in the cassette tape, and then you'd run a command on the computer,
Yeah.
and it would activate the cassette tape, listen just to the tones,
Yeah.
bring that recording in, and then the game would show up.
So it was analog audio signals instructing
Absolutely, just like a modem.
Interesting. Okay.
And I had like Maze of the Minotaur.
Yeah.
And that was a text-based game. I did have a cartridge game called Daggers of Daggeroth. It's one of my favorite games. It was a 3D line-based game. Everything was lines, and you'd run, and as you ran, your heartbeat would go start beating, and if it beat too fast, you'd die. So you'd have to run and stop and wait, run and stop and wait. It was a lot of fun.
Was this all text-based or ANSI graphics at that point?
This was graphics. This was ANSI graphics. It was all lines, line-based graphics on this one. It was a dungeon. You fought knights and blobs and things.
Yeah.
And that was really my beginning.
Yeah, getting your beak wet, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah, or wetting your beak, getting your feet wet. I remember my cousin, this was probably around 1989 or something, his father got a computer in their basement, and he put in a floppy disk, and you could play Wheel of Fortune. And I thought that was just the greatest, I thought that was the most amazing thing I had ever seen, you know?
In high school, the late 80s, I had my pastor at the church I was in at the time had a computer, which was rare at that time, right? Back in, this is 87, 88, probably. And it was a K-Pro. It was a big box. It was about 2 feet wide and about a foot or longer or deeper, about that deep. And, it had a little, probably an 8-inch black and white screen on it. 2 big floppy disks and a keyboard, no mouse, because it was all text. And I did my term papers. I would go sit in his office and type up my term papers on it and print them out. But the keyboard would latch onto the front and close and clip on, and it was a portable.
Huh.
Weighed about 40 pounds.
Yeah. But technically portable.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, with the advent of video games, that was a big deal, right, for the computer world.
Absolutely.
People don't think about it, but every console, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, even up to the modern consoles, are just a computer. They're just a computer finely tuned to serve one purpose, to play video games, right?
Right.
So I never thought about that when I was a kid. I didn't realize when I was playing Nintendo, I was actually playing a very specialized computer, but that's all it was. A computer has a hard drive. It has a way to store information. It has RAM. It has a processor. It has outputs, whether that's audio or video, and it has inputs for commands from a keyboard or a mouse, or in that case, a joystick or a controller, right?
Right.
Yeah. So that was your introduction to the technical digital world, and you've never looked back, just kind of kept pursuing that next horizon. What came after that for you?
After
getting that first computer and learning how to write the code and then doing the hardware upgrade.
I was always into computers. I got my Atari 2600 shortly thereafter. And,
Nice.
And I still have it. I still have the Coco, too, as well.
Oh, do you really? Are they both working?
Oh, they still work.
Stuff back then was made to last.
Yeah.
Yeah. It
definitely was. The joysticks on the Atari were not made to last because the rubber piece would always pull off.
Yeah.
But the joystick with the machine itself still functions just like it did way back when.
Yeah.
I did a number of things. I went to college after high school and pursued programming, and realized in a couple of years I did not like it.
Yeah.
It was not, programming was not something I wanted to do. Sit in one spot all day hacking code, not for me.
Yeah.
So I eventually switched into photography. It's where I met my wife.
Yeah.
Did that, graduated from college, and then moved to Minneapolis, did some photography for a couple of years there, got burnt out. Again, like I said, I sold all my gear. And then I became, I started working as my first real tech job.
Yeah, was like tech support,
was
level 1 kind of thing, or?
Yeah, it was a help desk for Ameritech.net BBS.
Okay, bulletin board system.
Well, it was an ISP like AOL.
Oh, are we 56K?
It was dial up, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
And so yeah, I had some interesting calls from that, but
yeah,
that was fun. That lasted about 6-8 months.
Yeah,
and then I got my first consulting job with a company called CompUSA Integration Services.
Yeah. How'd you end up in Louisville?
After a couple of changes, CompUSA, I worked for them. They went bankrupt. They went out of business. And then I went to working for a company called, I can't even remember the name of the company now. It'll come to me in a minute.
Yeah.
Another company in Minneapolis. Then a couple of years later, they went bankrupt.
Oh man, you're setting a bad.
I'm telling you,
precedent
it's
here.
just crazy. So I started looking. I decided I didn't want to live in Minneapolis anymore after a trip to Atlanta in the wintertime.
Yeah.
So I got a job in Nashville, contract job that lasted about 6 months, 8 months.
They go bankrupt too. I'm
No,
just
they
kidding.
didn't go bankrupt.
For those of you wondering, Reliable Tech Help is not going bankrupt anytime soon. So,
And then I moved to moved to Louisville to work for a consulting company here.
yeah,
And then years later, we met. You and
Yeah.
I met when I was working for a company called Warren Technology. And we hit it off and decided we had some synergies.
yeah,
And I stepped out on my own for the second time.
yeah,
And that's what we've been doing ever since, 13 years.
yeah. I met David, I believe it was 2009, at my BNI group, and they came to me before the meeting and said, "Hey, this guy's here. He wants to visit, but he does what you do. You know, are you okay with that?" And I said, "Of course." I've always taken a open arms, open-minded approach to my so-called competition. I'm not cutthroat. There's enough business for everybody to stay happy and get paid. So I was like, sure, bring him in, let him talk about what he does, and we connected. And I got your number, and I found out you did kind of business IT, and so I was just getting started at that point, expanding the business side of what I did. I kind of made my name doing residential work, and I got in a few jams at some offices I couldn't get out of, and I'd call David, and he was usually available and walked me through it. And I was like, dude, you are really talented. You're a great problem solver. You've got the experience and the skill set. Come work with me. come work with me. And David worked out a clever exit from the place he was at, because that place had him sitting at a desk for probably half your work week, just waiting on work. And David is not a sit at a desk guy. He wants to be in the weeds, out in the field, doing the work, solving the problems, that kind of stuff, getting his hands dirty, so to speak. And to his credit, he came with me, and I was able to convince him to do that. And we built that side of the business slowly, and it's expanded every year since. And now David has more work than he can handle, and he's the heart and soul of our business, particularly on the business IT side. And that's where we are today. So it's a great story. David is a man of great integrity and character. Like I said, he's someone I admire very much and look up to, and it's a privilege to call you my friend and to work with you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You've earned that. That being said, let's talk about modern day. So give us a rundown of like the 3 or 4 most recent jobs you've done for our business clients, how you helped them, and what that looked like. You can start with Nimlock if you want.
Good grief. Well, I'm working with a company called Nimlock Nimlock, Kentucky. They were on Google Workspace, have been on there for years. They're primarily a Mac shop. They do graphics, business setups for trade shows and conventions and things.
Just to clarify for the listeners, Google Workspace is Google's alternative to Microsoft Office. So you do your email, spreadsheets, documents, that kind of stuff. Yeah,
absolutely. And then they decided they wanted to move over to Office 365 off Google Workspace, which is a change I support.
Mm-hmm.
So the last couple of weeks, I've been working towards getting that migration done. We did migrate all the mailboxes over earlier this week. Working on getting Google Drive and getting some shared calendaring moved over, but we're in the weeds of getting that done. This week. I worked for another company called Eclipse Roofing. They're kind of expanding how they do business, put in a new server for them, setting up remote office support so they can securely connect back into their office to get back to their server and their data set. They're putting in a product called Surf Pro that's going to be handling all their business needs. And I'm working with a guy to get that installed on the server as well.
Does that handle their scheduling and their client list and their calendars, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, most of that. It's going to handle a lot of their documentation, photos, jobs, and things along those lines.
Invoicing, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Well, give us one more.
I got another company I work with. It's called Phoenix Process Equipment Company. They're an interesting company. They're a company that does dewatering, which essentially means that they take the mine sludge, the liquid, and dirt and sludge out of mines like rock mines and coal mines and other things.
Yeah.
And they move it out into a conveyor belt. They dewater the sludge. They basically, using a couple of different techniques, they will get the water out so that the sludge that comes out is mostly now dry.
Uh-huh.
Once it's dried, they can take it and put it into a landfill. They don't have to have sludge ponds. They can track it off to a landfill and then reuse the water back in the mine.
Okay.
Which is kind of cool. So I've been handling their IT needs for probably 15 years now.
Wow.
Soup to nuts, servers, laptops, PCs, everything, remote access, all of it.
We're going to get into a list of the many services that you offer. We can't cover them all today, but we'll try to hit some highlights. Before we do that, when you were talking about the various companies you're helping, it occurred to me, you've got a front row seat to some really interesting, creative entrepreneurs and business owners. I mean, think about all the different businesses you've gone in and done work for, and there are so many talented people out there.
Correct.
Just providing a service that the market demands, right? And you've got a front row seat to that.
Yeah.
That's got to be an interesting part of your work, right? Meeting a new client who's like, oh my gosh, I didn't know there was a business for doing this. And
That's
right.
right.
And then you go in there and they've got employees and they own their building and they got it,
Absolutely.
Yeah. Talk about that. It has to be an interesting part of what you do every day, right?
It definitely is, to see the innovations that people put forth. I mean, truthfully, going back to Phoenix, you look at Gary Drake. He's the owner of Phoenix Process Equipment Company. He and some people developed this technology to build these custom filter presses to dewater. I don't even know if that was a term before he did it.
But, he might have been a pioneer, huh?
Yeah,
Wow.
so
Okay.
they built these presses, these custom presses, and they have business that stretches the globe. They have on every continent. They've got some of their equipment that's working. They do a lot of work in Australia.
Yeah.
And other places. But it's pretty cool to see the innovations that come out of these places, different ways to do things. The spray foam industry, I've got a number of clients in that industry as tool, and that's pretty cool, the different techniques that you see in the equipment that they use for that.
Yeah, David and I don't always agree on matters of politics and some other things, but I think we both agree on the power of the free market, right?
Absolutely.
Get the government out of my way. Let me live my life. Let me do my job. I'll run a successful business. I'll pay you your taxes. I'll follow the laws. Just get out of my way and don't interfere, right?
Correct.
And these countless clients, you probably helped thousands of clients by now in the 20 plus years you work for, at least hundreds, possibly thousands.
Right.
And you get a front row seat to just how the free market works. I'm a big believer in that. I'm not making a political statement. I've just seen it happen.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, if you incentivize people with a payoff, like I tell people, when you bring something to the marketplace that has value, the marketplace will reward you for doing so. And leaving people alone, leaving them free to make their own decisions and be creative and start up their own businesses and solve problems, it's a beautiful thing to get a front row seat to, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's worth noting. Let's get into just some typical things that you do. I'll hit the bullet points and you can add if I miss anything. Networking's a big one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's primarily, there's a lot of what I do. Just about everywhere I go, you have to have a network, right? Mm-hmm. Even just a connection back to your cable modem or your internet is a network.
Sure.
So the point of a network is to share data. And a lot of companies don't have the infrastructure that you would think of a larger company where they have centralized servers and things along those lines as well. A lot of the small companies still need to share data, but they don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
So that's where I come in and set up, SharePoints on their server so that they can have centralized storage so everybody can get to the data they need to, and that helps the efficiency of the business.
Yeah, and when you think about it, the modern workplace has a printer or two. They have wireless devices that need to be updated in real time. They've got calendar entries going in all the time. They've got their contact list being updated, managing inventory, invoicing, managing client records, handling sensitive data and all that. The networking piece is a substantial percentage of what you do day in and day out, and it's the lifeblood of a small business, I would say.
Yeah, about almost everything I do encompasses the network in some way.
Yeah. Some other areas where people might not think we can help them is in audio video, right?
Right.
We did a project for a client as an insurance company, and we put a smart TV on the wall and a sophisticated camera and a microphone system so that they can have teleconferencing, so to speak, between their employees if they're staying home from work that day, or even other people anywhere around the world, right?
That's correct. That's correct. We put in a large screen TV and like you said, a smart camera that had a mic array built in. And I've been back and spoken with them, and they're very happy with it.
Yeah, that's great. So audio video, we can do a lot of intelligent home and intelligent office stuff, right? If you need surveillance cameras, if you need a security component, we can assist you with that. I have the disclaimer is we're not licensed to install security systems, but if you want to purchase your own DIY security equipment, we can help you install it.
Correct.
Okay. We do all think about everything's connected now. Your dishwasher is connected, your printer is connected, your TV is connected, the lights in your home can be connected. You can even get a connected smart lock for your door, and we can help people with all that, right?
That is correct. I've got all that in my house.
Yeah. That's another thing too. You're always testing out new products and new services to figure out, kind of doing your market research, so to speak, so that you can personally recommend products not only you've worked with, but you use, right?
That's correct. I love technology.
Me too.
And I love gadgets.
Yeah.
And so I'm always looking and thinking and trying out different things. I like to have knowledge of what I sell and what people want, so I try to get involved and work with things.
And that's where integrity comes in. David is not going to recommend a product to you that he either A, has not personally worked with, and or B, owns in his home. That's an integrity issue, because we have to stand behind the products we install. So we're not going to just randomly suggest something to you unless we have proof that it's worked in the field and or in our own personal lives. Let's talk about electronics. I look at the numbers every day, and sometimes it blows my mind. We sell a lot of electronics.
Yeah.
We sell computers, we sell TVs, we sell printers, we sell intelligent home devices.
We sell cameras,
software.
We sell software.
Yeah.
We sell a lot of different things. I mean, you think about the breadth of what we do. I mean, everybody uses a computer, so sure, we work on computers, but we work on things that integrate. Email systems. We work on cameras. We work on all that kind of stuff. Even we've even put up digital signage.
Yeah,
for companies.
Yeah.
Put in a digital signage solution that in a restaurant that put their menu boards up on the screen, and they could have rolling menu boards or different ads and other things come up.
Yeah, we've done some retail stuff too. Now that you mentioned that, we did. It was at 2 Vans shoe stores. We did the entire.
Absolutely.
David, using his creativity and his intelligence and experience, was project manager on a complete build out of 3 retail stores, right? 2 Vans and 1 leather shop. Was that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so David handled everything. He handled the phones, he handled the data, he handled the computers, he handled the wiring. I mean, David ran the whole project from the whole tech side. We did all of it: speakers, audio, distributed audio, video, all that kind of stuff. So those are some examples of the things that we can do. And then obviously the basic stuff you think about. Your laptop's slow, your internet doesn't connect, your printer won't print. We call that break fix in the industry. David's going to show up and fix that for you.
Right.
I want to mention some things that make us unique, I think, compared to our competition. I don't talk bad about my competition. I just say, look, they do this, they do it this way, we do this, we do it this way, and you, the consumer, can make the decision that's best for you. The first one is we're equally proficient in a PC environment, an Apple or Mac environment, Android, right? iOS, and now with our new team member Justin, he brings the skill set of Linux on board with us too.
Correct.
So there's really nothing you can throw at us that we can't figure out or haven't done before. The other space where we're unique, and David doesn't do much of this because he's our business guy, but we'll do residential work. Most of our so-called competition doesn't want to come to your house. If they do,
that's absolutely right.
Yeah, if they do, and that's fine. That's their decision, right? But they've neglected that market, and it's been really good for us, right? Because most of our so-called competition refers up people to us to do residential work because they don't want to do it. Another area, I think we're very competitive price-wise. Residential house trip is $100 per hour. For David's services, it's $125 per hour. That's very competitive if you shop around price-wise. And then the third and probably the most important is how we get paid. Most of our competition wants to operate on what's called the managed services model.
Right.
That's a fancy modern term for a retainer. That's all it really is. And I'm not knocking that. It works for a lot of businesses. we look at it this way. In a retainer scenario, there's usually a winner and a loser, right? Either the consumer paid for more services than they consumed, or the provider provided more services than they got paid for. We don't like that. You pay us when we work. You don't pay us when we don't work. Everybody's happy, right?
That's right.
Yeah. And so for David's hourly rate, our typical client would say probably less than 20 employees. The majority of those probably less than 5 or 10, right?
Yeah.
And they know that there's some outliers, but that's probably the average. And they know that, look, they're going to have IT needs. They can't tell you if it's tomorrow or 6 months from now. They have us available when they need us, and they only pay us when we work, right?
That is correct.
Now, I will tout the advantage of the managed service model is if you have a bigger operation and or you want to budget out your IT needs into the future, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years down the road, it's appealing to businesses that want to do that because they say, hey, maybe I'll pay for a little bit more than I use, but at least I know what it's going to cost me and I can budget that out. So we're not knocking that model. We've just found a nice little niche for ourselves where you pay us our hourly rate as needed, and when you don't need us, you don't have to pay us. So can you comment on that?
Yeah, I've worked for several different consulting companies that went into the managed services model, and just like you said, those winners and losers, and typically the loser's not the company that's
right.
that's running the managed services.
Or they don't stick around very long.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right. And, typically in a managed services model, they charge you per device, so much per PC or laptop, so much per switch, per router, per server. And basically they have an automated agent that runs on those servers that reports back when something goes wrong. They're not actually actively performing a lot of the services that they do. They have backups and they have things they do. There's nothing wrong with that model.
Yeah.
I just think it isn't in the best interest of a lot of companies to do it that way.
Yeah. One thing I think what's worth pointing out too is when I was a young man, you're a little older than me, but not too much. When you had a TV problem, you called your TV person. When you had a stereo problem, you called your stereo person.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a computer issue or you had a security issue or whatever it might be, in our lifetime, all those independent, discrete categories have kind of coalesced under the blanket of IT. Your computer guy can do all that now, or gal, right? We're not discriminating. I think that's worked out very well for us, hasn't it? And that coalescence of all those areas is still going. I mean, there's things we didn't do 5 years ago now that we do every day, primarily the intelligent home stuff, right? That's really exploding. So I think that was worth mentioning. A couple areas, again, where I think we're unique is we can typically get to a client. If you create a ticket with us, we can typically address that within 1 to 2 business days.
Correct.
That's very unusual. Now, there's the occasional outlier where we're really swamped and it might take a little longer. But if you tell us it's an emergency, 90% of the time we're addressing that issue and resolving it within 1 to 2 business days. I think that makes us unique too, and is worth pointing out. That's a great kind of description of what David does and his contribution to Reliable Tech Help. Kind of wanted to talk about some other things now. So you ready?
Sure, let's go.
All right. Well, I'll set this up here. I started the podcast for several reasons. One of the main reasons was to promote free speech and to encourage respectful dialogue between people who might disagree on things. And so we'll go ahead and get it out on the table. I call myself an agnostic atheist, which means that ultimately, philosophically, I'm an agnostic when it comes to matters of God and why we're here and all that kind of stuff, because I don't know, right? I don't know. The Jews could have it figured out. Jesus could be the Messiah. Muhammad could be Elijah's prophet. I don't know, right? I have my suspicions, but I don't know. But I call myself an agnostic atheist because day to day I live my life like an atheist. I'm not hostile towards religion. I just don't lean on it. I don't think about God. I don't pray to God. I don't ask God to get me out of jams and so forth. So philosophically, I'm an agnostic. Day to day, how I live my life, I'm an atheist, right? But it is important for me to also point out when we talk about these things, I'm not hostile towards religion.
Just me.
Well, yeah, but for other reasons. There's plenty of reasons for that. But I enjoy talking to people about what they think and what they believe and why they think why they think the way they do and why they believe the way they do. And so David is a believing and practicing Mormon, right?
Yes.
Yep. And politically, he considered himself to be a conservative Republican, right?
Correct.
I politically consider myself to be a proud independent moderate. If you had to push me on one side of the fence or the other, I guess you could call me a moderate Democrat or a liberal. But I do have some liberal views, some conservative views, and then I have some independent views. But what I wanted to point out about David is, and we mentioned this earlier, he's a man of integrity. He's a family man. You have 3 children and your lovely wife.
Correct.
He does everything that he does for his family. He puts them first. He also puts his faith and his involvement in his church first. And I've always admired that about David. I've said this before on the podcast, and it's worth saying again. I believe that most people who go to church, synagogue, temple, whatever it might be, in America and around the world are taught to forgive people and be kind and be generous and love each other and all that. And those are my values. So the packaging might be a little bit different. The way David delivers his values and his beliefs might be different from the way I do, but the underlying values are all the same, right? Love people, be generous, be kind, be tolerant, turn the other cheek, have compassion, and so forth.
Yes.
So David and I always get in, not always, but fairly often get into interesting discussions, particularly about politics. And I wanted to bring up some interesting things to talk about, okay?
Okay, let's go.
I describe myself as being reluctantly pro-choice. I think that most abortions are arguably wrong. I'm very sympathetic to the motivations of the pro-life movement. I do value life, human life, animal life. And what's more delicate and sacred and unable to protect itself than an unborn child or a child in general, right?
Absolutely.
I'm very sympathetic to that. However, I believe the entire story isn't told unless we talk about the rights of the mother too.
Right.
Right? Because she's a human being as well. And so I'll just get it out there. I think there's a fundamental human right where a person should be able to go to their doctor and have a private conversation about their health care and what's going on inside their body and get medical treatment. And so that's my sticking point for why I describe myself as being reluctantly pro-choice. I think most abortions are bad and shouldn't happen. However, I think there should be some reasonable exceptions. And so what say you?
I tend to agree with most of that. I mean, I think we already have protection between, the discussions between the doctor and the patient. That's called HIPAA.
Yeah.
That's a government protection that doesn't allow the doctor or anybody else to discuss your medical history with anybody that you don't authorize in advance.
But government power could override that. They could be subpoenaed by a judge, and they could dissolve that instantly.
Well, that could be that could be with just about anything.
Yeah.
That they do. They can't, they can't put cameras and mics in your house, but the government could override that and do that and watch you 24/7.
Yeah.
So if we're going to go out on a limb, we're going to have to, you have to think about everything.
So you think HIPAA is enough to protect people's medical rights? I
think HIPAA is what we have in place as our protection against medical issues. I've run up against HIPAA in our job. I've worked for medical doctors as well.
Yeah.
And I have to be careful about solutions I put in that support that and how to advise people on how they communicate. Mm-hmm. Because sending medical records across email is a violation of HIPAA. Mm-hmm. Because it's not, unless it's encrypted.
Right.
So yeah, I think there's a lot of protections out there. And I think if, I think there's protections in place that keep that from going already.
Yeah.
You can always say, could happen, but you can say that about a lot of different things.
Well, I'm glad to hear you're fairly moderate on that issue because most folk in your corner politically are very extreme when it comes to that, and it's like there are no abortions ever for any reason, even if it damages the health of the mother or up to and possibly including death by giving birth or carrying the child.
Yeah, I still believe that human life, begins early in conception, or thereabouts.
I do too. That's the fundamental argument, anyways. Is when does it begin?
Right, and this is exactly right, and that's where a lot of the debate comes in. Mm-hmm. Is where does life begin? Some believe life begins at birth. Mm-hmm. In that case, I guess you'd have to consider that the baby inside the womb is nothing but extension of the mother. It's a symbiote, not a true life form until it pops out and you cut it loose and it starts to cry. I think, life begins, that first connection of, that first split of the cell when it forms an embryo, that's where life begins. And I think life is sacred.
Yeah, I do
It
too.
shouldn't be taken. Now, is there a case for abortion? I guess, yeah, I'm sure there is. In some cases, especially the life of the mother in danger. No doubt in my
What about
mind.
rape and forced incest and that kind of stuff? Is that a little?
That is, I agree. That's a grayer area, but I'm open to that. I read an article the other day, and I saw a quote, and I don't know if how I feel about whether I agree with it or not, but they said they were pushing a little bit of an extreme, actually a great extreme. They said, so let's go out and take all the babies, all the people that were born of incest, and let's go kill them right now because, certainly they shouldn't live, and see how their parents feel.
Wow.
That pushed an envelope for me. That's a very extreme angle, but it's trying to make a point.
It's
that angle.
It's arguably the most complicated and delicate political issue of the modern era, right?
Yeah.
I mean, what's more passionate and more infuriating and more, captivating than the issue of abortion, right? And you can take two otherwise friendly and kind people and you ask them to answer that question, all of a sudden they hate each other, and that's sad. Yeah.
It's very sad. The political environment we find ourselves in now, where people won't listen to other viewpoints. You don't have the opportunity to talk to somebody in a lot of cases and express your beliefs, and have them express them back. I used to be that way, where you could have a two person or a conversation against people who have different ideologies and walk away smiling and shaking hands and now
and maybe learning something from that person.
Well,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now it's if you don't agree with me, you're wrong and awful, and I don't want to see you or talk to you or do business with you ever again.
And it's breaking up lifelong friendships and family relationships and everything.
It is
ruining the office. Yeah. I'm always reminded of George Carlin. I thought he had some really prophetic words. Rest in peace, George. One of my biggest influences. He said, conservative Christian Republicans are obsessed with the life of a child right up to the moment when it's born. And then once it's born, they don't want anything to do with it. No welfare, no food stamps, no education, no after school programs, no health insurance, no nothing, right? And I think that obviously to achieve a comedic response, you kind of take things to the extreme.
Absolutely.
But I think he has some points there, right? I mean, the Republican Party on one hand is the party of, pro-life, right? On the other hand, they're like, well, who's going to take care of these children? What government programs can we put in place to feed and care for these children and educate them? Then all of a sudden they're not so interested. So I think it's a fair point. But the whole issue has become politicized, and like you said, I wish people could just have a conversation about it. And I don't know about you, but some of the most interesting conversations I've ever had and the most fulfilling and interesting relationships I've formed are with people I disagree with.
Yeah, I agree.
You can learn something from that person. And I try to tell people it doesn't harm you to hypothetically put yourself in someone else's shoes and try to understand why from their perspective, right? As a result of their life experiences and their unique vantage point on the world, they arrived at those conclusions. It doesn't diminish your own.
I think that sometimes people don't want to engage in conversations with people they disagree with because they might just be wrong.
Well, yeah, and not only that, the reasoning for their values is shaky, right? Yeah, because you have to question if someone can't even engage with somebody they disagree with. What does that say about the foundation of their principles, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. I was going to mention. I find myself defending conservative Republicans a lot and Christians, right? Because I am not any one of those, right? But I think it's shameful how someone like yourself or a conservative thinker, a Christian or a Republican, can't even walk onto a public university campus and give a speech anymore without them pulling the fire alarm, setting something on fire,
Cancel culture,
rioting, calling the police,
absolutely,
possibly assaulting that person, right? I think that's shameful. I have a 3-year-old son, and I hope he wants to go to college one day. And if I send him to a public university or any university, I want him to be exposed to a lot of viewpoints, religious, political, cultural, academic, intellectual, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
And to totally just dismiss these people, that's a form of fascism. And if you look back at all the modern last 300 or 400 years worth of human atrocities and genocide, they all started with a fascistic movement.
Yeah, I remember when I was in college, there were people coming on campus and speeches and things of different viewpoints. Some I agreed with, some I didn't. And what it came down to is if somebody was talking about something you didn't agree with and didn't want to deal with, you didn't go see them.
Yeah. Or you could turn the channel, right?
Right. It's a strange world we live in now that nobody can have opinion that differs from yours. And if they do, we must do everything to destroy them.
And social media has poured gasoline on
Absolutely.
that.
The anonymity.
Yeah.
The anonymity of being on social media has emboldened people to spew hate like never before because they know you're never going to find them.
Digital courage. Yeah,
there you go.
That's what I've heard it described as. I think that's sad. I think the world would be a better place if people who disagreed would just sat across from each other and had a conversation from time to time and heard each other out and tried to empathize with each other. At the end of the day, our values are the same. If I was walking by and you were drowning, I'd jump in and save you, and I wouldn't check your religion card or your politics card or quiz you on your values. I'd just do it, right? And you would do the same for me.
I might check myself second when I saw it was you. But
once I'm involved, it's a slightly different calculation, but ultimately you'd arrive at the right decision. No, but seriously, I think there should be more of that.
Yeah.
I mentioned the fact that I'm an agnostic atheist. You're a Mormon Christian, right? Our new team member, Justin, is Jewish. So the joke is a Mormon, a Jew, and an atheist walk into a bar and form an IT company. But I got to tell you, diversity of thought, not just diversity that we're taught by the diversity, inclusion, all that movement, but real intellectual diversity of thought, diversity of ideas is very important. And it's benefited us professionally.
Yeah.
You're more of an Android guy, PC guy, Microsoft, that kind of thing. And I'm more of an Apple guy. I like iPhones and Apple, the iPad and the MacBook and so forth. And if we saw everything the same way and had the same, the same preferences in those spaces, I don't think we'd be able to offer the quality product that we do to our clients,
We're pretty diverse in what we can offer. That's for sure.
Yeah. And so let's talk about some more political issues. What do you feel the role of religion should be in politics? Should it be, do we have freedom of religion? Do we have freedom from religion? We have some combination of both. What does that look like for you?
There you go. There's a term right there. Freedom from religion. That's tying back into our last conversation, I think. We have freedom of religion in our Constitution, right? That means we can pursue and pursue our beliefs as we see fit within reason, obviously. Mm-hmm. We can't go out and sacrifice people to whoever.
Yeah, you can't use your religious beliefs to commit crimes, but yeah.
Right. And so that means, I can pursue and I can have my beliefs and I can operate in society just like you can with your beliefs. I think that's very important in our country, and it's unique among a lot of countries in the world that have that ability. You look at other countries and you can't have a religion other than the state mandated religion, or, if you do, you can get into severe trouble, including death.
Yeah.
I think, in some ways religious makes us more tolerant, and some ways it can make you intolerant.
Yeah.
Because there are those lines in the sand that are drawn. The LGBTQ movement is one of those lines where a lot of religions, a lot of religious people view that as intolerant, as an aberration, as wrong. I don't necessarily see it that way. But I feel like it's your life. You have the right to live it the way you want. Now, whether or not I agree with your lifestyle is a whole different story, but I'm not going to condemn you or anything for that. That's just not how I believe or how I run my life.
He's sincere and authentic when he says that to the audience. He generally might have an opinion that something is wrong, or he might prefer an alternative, but he's not going to cram that down your throat and judge you and do all that. I think it's worth noting. I've noticed that the people on the left, not liberals and Democrats, there's decent liberals and Democrats, there's decent conservatives and Republicans, the extremes, the left and the right. On the left, I've noticed that their politics becomes their religion because they don't have one normally. And on the other extreme, on the right,
the religion becomes the politics.
Yeah. And so I think that's worth noting. I wish there was more of a respectful dialogue between like interfaith discussions too, right? Do you think that government should be primarily secular? Should it be neutral when it comes to religious views?
I don't think that's possible because the government's made up of people, and people have their own opinions and their own beliefs. So to say that the government could be completely neutral, I don't think I think that's a pipe dream. I don't think it can be done.
It's not realistic.
No.
Yeah. Should the government?
It should try to maintain neutrality. Yes.
Okay.
I think so.
Yeah.
The problem, as you were saying before, when you look at the left and the right, and you see those people that are so vocal on both ends. And what I believe is that the people that are radical, the extreme right and the extreme left, the ones that you always see yelling at each other, are actually the minority. That most people are reasonable. Yeah. Most people will accept each other and will work with each other and do. I don't go through my life on a day-to-day basis. I meet a lot of people all the time. And almost to a T, every person I meet is polite and respectful and wanting to be nice and not wanting to judge you on your beliefs or anything else. They are very much just normal, everyday, average people that you meet every day. Mm-hmm. What you get are these talking heads, these people that are radicalized on both sides that come out and incite and sound like they're coming from the majority because they're so vocal.
Yeah. I don't want to give any specifics, but I know for a fact that David has been put professionally in some situations where the person he's working for or the environment was very counter to his values, his personal beliefs, but that person would never have known it because you treated that person with respect. You treat them just like any other customer. You're there to do a job. That person is no less deserving of your best effort and your respect. And I've seen that a couple of times in the 13 years we've been working together. So I think that needs to be said. That kind of leads me into Jesus. I was raised Christian, and the Jesus that I came to know, that I still kind of believe in intellectually as an example of how to be a human being, he was a hippie, man. He hung out with the least of these, right? The criminals, the sick, the uneducated, the
not all, but yes, that's
right.
That's the fishermen and
and the everyday people, right? Just
that's right.
And he would listen to them, and he would identify with them, and he would have compassion for them, and that's the Jesus that I see David portraying to people when he interacts with them. I've maybe seen you get not even mad, but maybe agitated once or twice in the 13 years. I've never heard you say anything disrespectful or unkind about someone. I wish I could say that about myself, but and I think that the people who out there who are in my boat that are agnostic and or atheist need to understand that there are people out there like David who are just saying, look, my job every day is to focus on my faults and myself and try to be a better person. And that job requires so much of my time and my effort. I don't have time and resources left over.
I'm not very good at it either.
I disagree, but that's part of the process. But if I have my eye on the ball and I'm thinking about what can I do better, how can I be a kinder, gentler, more compassionate, generous person every day, I don't have leftover time and resources to go around judging other people.
That's true.
Right? And that's the Jesus that I think is worth promoting as an example for how to live your life and how to treat other people. And David is a fine example of that. So,
well, thank you.
Before any of you people who listen to this try to cancel him or me for that matter for having a conversation with somebody who dares to have some religious beliefs, just take a step back and think about it and say, okay, well, how does this guy live his life? He might follow a doctrine and a belief system I disagree with, but at the end of the day, how's he going to treat me? He's going to treat me with respect and decency and be kind to me. And so that needs to be said. I think it's worth mentioning again that I think it's shameful. It started with the media, right? The media really proliferated with cable news back in like the 80s. And now we have social media, which were the worst parts of the media, right?
Absolutely.
You mentioned the voices on the extremes, the left and the right. They're amplified and given a megaphone by the media to start with, and then social media kind of picked up that
Right.
cause. So it was a great point you made, just because those are the loudest voices, and now via the media and social media, they're the most heard. They don't represent the average person living next door to you. They don't represent your children's classmates, parents,
That's right.
at your school. The average person is just trying to keep their job, pay their mortgage,
Live their life.
They don't have time for all that. And yes, most of those people will go out and vote, but they'll vote basically based on what their personal convictions are and what they like about the candidate or don't like, and then they go back to living their everyday life, which for most people, let's face it, requires most if not all of their resources, their time and their money and their effort. So that was a great point that you made. Yeah, so I'm glad we talked about that. At this point, I have 3 questions for you.
3 questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
This segment of 3 questions is brought to you by our nonprofit, See Good to Be Good, which aims to act as a source of hope, motivation, and inspiration to help folks achieve their dreams. We are currently accepting donations to help fund our needs-based scholarship to help a young person pay for their education in the arts. If you'd like to help us, please let us know. Question number 1. Why are you successful?
I sometimes wonder if I am.
Insofar as you are successful, what do you attribute that to?
I think a lot of it has to do with just consideration for people, their time, and their needs. So my job, my main job is to help people. Mm-hmm. That's what I see what I do is. And so I treat people politely. I don't talk politics and religion with my clients, or with many people for that matter.
Yeah.
And I try to do a good job for people and get things done. I try to develop relationships with my clients. A lot of them I've been with and for a long time, and a lot of them I'll call friends. And we do things for each other, and I think that just being a normal person that can talk to people and relate and not judge and other things helps me to be successful.
So you're successful because you serve people.
Yes, I guess.
Yeah,
makes sense.
A servant's heart.
I suppose so.
Trying to solve a problem, but also doing it in a kind, respectful manner.
And I get paid.
Well, that helps too. Yeah, yeah. I think it was Rabbi Litvin wrote the book "Thou Shalt Prosper." He said, when you do a good job, people give you certificates of appreciation with dead presidents on them.
There you go.
I like that. Why are you happy?
Why not?
Yeah.
I mean, I've got a beautiful wife, a wonderful family, 3 kids that I love.
You do.
I've got a job that I can do. I don't work for anybody. Well, I work for a lot of people, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So I'm able to live my life the way I want to. Mm-hmm. I may not have everything I want, but I don't want for much. And I just enjoy my job. Somebody once said, if you love what you do, what is it?
You're not working.
You never work a day in your life, or something like. I can't remember. I know I butchered that quote, but you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
and there's dignity and self-respect that comes from providing a service to the marketplace and being paid for that, right? And a sense of accomplishment.
There's nothing better for me to be in the trenches dealing with a significant problem. Somebody's company down. I had one here recently downtown. I had a company that called me up. We had to send half our people home because our network's down. And, I go in, and within 2 hours, I figured out the problem. I've resolved most of it, the problem, and they're back up and running, and they can bring their people back to work. Well, that makes me feel good because I love troubleshooting problems and that resolution. And I think that's what it really comes down to.
Yeah.
The resolution of a problem gets my adrenaline flowing, and I really like it.
Yeah, that problem-solving process is rewarding in and of itself, right?
Yeah.
Hunting it down, stalking it, and finally capturing it and solving the problem, right? but also you're helping people. You're making a difference in their lives.
Yeah.
They were able to do their work that day with a little bit less stress and frustration because what you did for them. That's got to be rewarding.
And that was a new client I'd never been to before, and
Yeah.
they'd called me back a couple of times for other little issues.
And that's a great example of what David can do for your company. You got out there that day.
Yeah, absolutely.
We can't always get out there. Here's our disclaimer that day, but when we can, we certainly will.
I'll tell you how I see things. And I tell all my clients this when I go in. They start talking to me about, one of the initial questions that come up when I deal with a new client a lot of times is how quickly, how soon can we expect you to have you there? I said, usually it's in a couple of days.
Yeah.
Usually I don't build my schedule out very far. It just kind of naturally grows on a day-to-day basis. It's not been that way here lately, but, and I said, look, there's only a couple of us, right? And I'm the only one of me. So if you call me and you say, hey, I've got an emergency, my company's down, I can't work. Well, I'm going to call the people that I'm supposed to be going to that day and say, hey, I'm going to have to reschedule your PC install or whatever it is because I've got a network down. And invariably they say, fine, no problem. Let us know when we can reschedule, because the way it's set up is if they were in an emergency situation, they'd want me to stop, drop, and come at that point for them as well.
Yeah.
And I have not had anybody get upset with me or yell at me or anything else because I had to postpone an appointment to help someone else.
Yeah. You say that you're happy. Your answer to the question was, why not? I love that. Going along that same line of thought, do you think happiness is a choice?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a choice. It's not necessarily a yes or no question.
Yeah.
It's a choice that you make every day.
Over and over again.
All the time. It's in every choice you make is whether you choose to do something that's going to help other people or choose to make yourself happy by doing what you do. Mm-hmm. Not all my choices are happy, but all of them end up making me happy.
The cumulative result. Yeah, is happiness. I like that. What obligation do you feel to help other people? Above and beyond just helping people professionally, I know you're very involved with your church. You want to talk about that? Or
I mean, why else are we here? I believe the purpose of us being here is a couple of things. We're here to learn. We're here to learn how to be good people. That's a fundamental, I believe. Mm-hmm. Is that our purpose to be on this earth is to learn and to serve each other. Mm-hmm. We are here to make our lives better. Now, making my life better doesn't mean to make your life worse.
Yeah.
I believe we can bring each other up and we can help each other. So, I think service is the reason we're here, to serve each other. There's
a beautiful tradition in Hanukkah in the Jewish faith, where Hanukkah being described as the festival of lights, and the menorah is very important, and candles have to burn every day and so forth. And the light itself is metaphorical and very symbolic. And I heard the rabbi at last year's Hanukkah lighting say, it doesn't cost any candle that's burning anything to lean over and light another candle. It doesn't diminish that candle's light one bit. I thought that was really powerful. Talking about your happiness, your success, and what obligation you feel to help other people, I'm kind of jealous of folks like you, because you fundamentally believe and are convinced that God created you. God gave you a purpose. God blessed you with talents and skills and a reason for being here. That's a cool thing, man. I have to admit, I'm kind of jealous of folks who believe, because it's a lovely idea, right? No, it really is.
It's a lovely idea.
No, it is. It's great, right? You're here. You were created by someone who loves you, and that person gave you skills and abilities and dreams and hopes and a purpose for being here and is looking out for you. I admire that. Just in the interest of full disclosure.
Somebody somewhere I read something, and forgive me, I don't know where these come from. They just come out of my head because I heard them once before. Somebody said that they didn't know whether God existed or not, right?
Yeah.
But they chose to believe, because if they believed that he does and he doesn't, oh well.
Yeah.
But if they didn't believe he did and he does,
Yeah.
that's a whole different story.
Well, and there's a whole psychological background in just believing in something, making your life better, right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think that says something about the human condition. Great. Those are great answers. Thanks for sharing those with us. Thomas Edison once said, genius is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. I love that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. If you'd like to be a guest on our show, or you would like help creating and or distributing your own podcast content, please contact us for more information. I'd like to take a moment to thank the talented people that work behind the scenes to make this podcast happen. There's the effervescent producer, David Snyder, running audio and video. The intrepid David Snyder casting and scripting the show. And finally, the brilliant and gifted David Snyder editing and distributing the show online.
There you go.
I know I'm biased, but I'd like to take a minute to thank those fine folks for their contributions to the show. I'd like to thank our guest, David Hastings, with Reliable Tech Help, for joining us today. I thoroughly enjoyed that. I'm going to say it again. David is one of the finest people I've ever had the privilege of working with and calling my friend. His character and integrity are impeccable and beyond reproach. And I wish there were more people like you out there. So thanks again for being here. I'd like to thank our guests, our listeners and our sponsors for making the podcast possible and hopefully successful. And we'll see you real soon on a future episode of the Respect to Math podcast.